The dust of Jerusalem still clung to their clothes, a constant reminder of the home they had lost. It was a gritty, tangible sorrow that they carried with them, a film on their skin and in their lungs. Each grain whispered of shattered dreams and a life irrevocably altered. God's people were exiles in Babylon, far from the familiar hills and valleys of their homeland. They found themselves surrounded by towering ziggurats and bustling marketplaces, a stark contrast to the simple agrarian life they once knew. The language was foreign, the customs strange, and the very air seemed thick with a sense of displacement. Strangers in a strange land, they yearned for the taste of home, the sound of their own music, the comfort of familiar faces. Every interaction was a reminder of their outsider status, a constant ache of longing for what they had left behind. The holy temple was rubble, the heart of their faith and identity reduced to a pile of stones. The place where they had communed with God, offered sacrifices and celebrated their heritage was now a desolate wasteland, a gaping wound in their collective memory. Their king in chains, a symbol of their broken nation and shattered sovereignty. The leader who was meant to protect and guide them was now powerless, a prisoner in a foreign land, stripped of his authority and dignity. His captivity mirrored their own, a stark reminder of their subjugation. Their hearts shattered. The weight of their loss was immense, a crushing burden that threatened to overwhelm them. They mourned for their families, their homes, their way of life, and the future that had been stolen from them. They wandered foreign streets, lost in a sea of unfamiliar faces and customs. The vibrant colors and exotic smells of Babylon only served to highlight their own sense of alienation. They were ghosts in a foreign land, haunted by memories of what once was. Haunted by loss, the echoes of laughter and celebration replaced by the constant hum of sorrow. Every sunrise brought a fresh wave of grief, a reminder of the joy that had been extinguished. They clung to each other for comfort, seeking solace in shared memories and whispered prayers, questioning if God had abandoned them. Had he turned his back on his chosen people? Had their sins been too great to forgive? The silence from heaven was deafening, fueling their doubts and deepening their despair. They cried out for answers, for a sign of hope, but only silence answered them. Their identity, once rooted in the land, the very soil that had nurtured their ancestors, and their relationship with Yahweh, the covenant that had defined them for generations, now felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty and despair. They struggled to reconcile their faith with their present reality, questioning everything they had once believed. False prophets offered easy hope, whispers of a swift return, "Don't unpack, we'll be home soon." Seductive words that tickled their ears. Their words were tempting, a soothing balm to their wounded spirits, promising quick relief and no need for patience. They painted a picture of immediate deliverance, a world where their suffering would vanish overnight. But these promises were hollow, built on lies and wishful thinking, distracting the people from facing their reality, preventing them from taking the necessary steps to rebuild their lives in exile. The exiles were encouraged to wait for a rescue, a miraculous intervention that would transport them back to Jerusalem. That wasn't coming soon. A false hope that kept them paralyzed and unable to adapt to their new circumstances, setting them up for deeper disappointment, a crushing blow that would further erode their faith and resilience. Into this confusion, this swirling vortex of hope and despair, a letter arrived, carried by a weary traveler, sealed with authority. Not from a false prophet peddling dreams of instant gratification, but from Jeremiah, a voice of truth even when it stung, the one who always told the hard truth, regardless of the consequences. A man who refused to sugarcoat reality, even when it was bitter. This letter would not offer comfort, not in the way they expected, but clarity. A sharp, unwavering focus on the path forward. It would challenge everything they wanted to believe, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable realities of their situation. The people gathered, anxious and desperate, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and trepidation, to hear what God had to say. Would it be a word of encouragement or a further test of their faith? Would it be hope, a glimmer of light in their dark exile, or another blow to their weary spirits? Another reason to lose faith? The answer would change the course of their exile, determining whether they would succumb to despair or find a way to thrive in a foreign land. Jeremiah's words would cut through the fog of false hope, exposing the lies that had been whispered in their ears. The real message from God was about to be revealed, a message that would challenge them, comfort them, and ultimately transform them. Jeremiah's scroll landed not with a gentle whisper, but like a thunderclap. It echoed through the dusty streets of Babylon, carrying a weight of truth that few were prepared to bear. The words, etched onto the ancient parchment, spoke of a future far different from the one the exiles had dared to dream, and it landed squarely among the exiles. These were people torn from their homes, their lives uprooted, their faith tested in the crucible of captivity. They yearned for a swift return, for the familiar comforts of Jerusalem, for the restoration of their shattered nation. No sugarcoating, no empty promises. Jeremiah offered no easy way out, no comforting lies to soothe their wounded spirits. Instead, he delivered just the raw, unvarnished truth from God. A truth that cut against the grain of their desires, a truth that demanded a radical shift in perspective. While others, the purveyors of false hope, promised a quick escape, a swift return to their homeland, painting vivid pictures of imminent liberation, Jeremiah's message was the opposite. A stark contrast to the soothing narratives they so desperately wanted to believe. "Settle in," he declared, his voice resonating with divine authority. "Build houses and plant gardens, this will last 70 years. The false prophets, with their silver tongues and seductive visions, had sold a fantasy, a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep the people docile and compliant, a fantasy of rebellion and impatience, of immediate gratification and effortless deliverance. This fueled a dangerous cocktail of denial and restlessness, preventing them from facing the reality of their situation and hindering their ability to adapt and survive. Jeremiah's words shattered those illusions, like a hammer blow against fragile glass. 70 years, an entire lifetime for most. A span of time that stretched out before them like an endless desert. This was not a brief detour, a temporary inconvenience to be endured with gritted teeth, but a call to embrace a new reality, to sink roots into foreign soil, to build a life in the midst of exile. The people were stunned, their faces etched with disbelief and confusion. Many were angry, their hopes dashed, their dreams deferred. Heartbroken, they mourned the loss of their past and the uncertainty of their future. But Jeremiah's message was not cruelty. It wasn't delivered with malice or a desire to inflict pain. It was, in fact, the only path to genuine hope, a hope grounded in reality, a hope that could withstand the trials and tribulations of exile. False prophets offered comfort, a fleeting and ultimately destructive solace. They did so by lying about the future, painting rosy pictures that had no basis in reality. Jeremiah, in contrast, offered a hard present, a difficult truth that demanded courage and resilience. But he did it for the sake of a real future, a future built on a foundation of honesty and faith. God was not ignoring their pain, he was not indifferent to their suffering, but he was working a deeper plan, a plan that transcended their immediate circumstances, a plan that would ultimately lead to their redemption. The journey wasn't about escaping Babylon, about clinging to a fading past, but about finding God within it, about discovering his presence in the midst of their pain, about allowing him to transform them from the inside out, even in exile. God's instructions through Jeremiah were shockingly practical. Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, eat what you grow. This wasn't survival. It was a command to truly live, even in exile. Planting a garden was an act of faith in tomorrow. God told them to invest in Babylon, to put down roots, to stop waiting for escape. Even more radical, marry, have children, grow as a people. God wanted them to thrive, not fade away. And then the hardest command, seek the peace and prosperity of Babylon, pray for it. Their well-being was now tied to their captors' well-being. God called them to be a blessing, to bring his peace to the very place of their pain. Babylon was not a prison, but a place to serve and grow. God was teaching them to see exile as opportunity. In the midst of these hard commands, these seemingly impossible expectations laid upon them in a foreign land, God offered a promise, a beacon of hope amidst the despair. It was a whisper of reassurance, a gentle reminder of his unwavering presence. "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord, plans not of chance but of purpose, plans not of abandonment but of deep, abiding care. These words were a lifeline, a cord of hope thrown into the pit of despair, a tangible connection to a future they could scarcely imagine. God was not surprised or absent. He hadn't forgotten them, nor had he abandoned them to their fate. He was intimately aware of their suffering. His plans were personal, tailored to each individual, a bespoke promise woven into the fabric of their lives, reaching into each exile's unique pain, understanding the depth of their sorrow, and offering solace in their isolation. God's intention was not harm, not to punish or destroy, but to refine and restore, but restoration, to rebuild what was broken, to heal what was wounded, and to renew what was lost. The exile felt like a wound, a deep and festering injury inflicted upon their souls, a constant reminder of their loss and displacement. But God meant it for healing. He intended to use their suffering as a catalyst for growth, a pathway to deeper understanding and resilience. The promise, this sacred declaration, this divine covenant, plans to prosper you, to grant you success and abundance, to see you flourish even in the most barren of landscapes, not to harm you, not to inflict pain or suffering, but to shield you from the worst of it, to protect you under my wing, to give you hope and a future. A future filled with promise, a horizon painted with the colors of dawn. Their present was bleak, a landscape of despair stretching out before them, seemingly without end. But God pointed them beyond 70 years. He offered them a glimpse of a future beyond their current suffering, a light at the end of a long tunnel. Hope was not denial of pain. It wasn't about pretending the suffering didn't exist, or minimizing the depth of their loss, but assurance that pain wasn't the end. It was the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of nights, dawn would eventually break. Restoration was coming, a promise whispered on the wind, a seed planted in the soil of their hearts. Even if it was far off, even if the journey seemed long and arduous, the destination was worth the wait. God's promise was not a quick fix, not a magic wand to wave away their troubles, but a slow and steady process of healing and rebuilding. But a deep certainty, a foundation of faith, an anchor in the storm, an unshakable belief in God's unwavering love. It was a light at the end of a long tunnel, a beacon of hope guiding them through the darkness. The exiles were not forgotten. They were not lost in the vast expanse of history, nor were they abandoned to their fate. They were held in God's plan, enfolded in His loving embrace, protected by His unwavering care. Their story was not over. It was merely a new chapter, a turning point in a narrative that was still being written. When God promised to prosper the exiles, He meant more than wealth or comfort. The Hebrew word is shalom, wholeness, well-being, peace. Shalom is flourishing even in hardship, a deep inner security. God wasn't promising riches, but a peace that Babylon couldn't take away. This reframed everything. God's goal was their spiritual health, not material ease. The exile was a tool to bring them to true dependence on Him. The promise was not escape, but peace within the storm. We often want God to change our circumstances, but He offers us shalom in the midst of them. God's plan is to make us whole, not just comfortable. His peace is the anchor in every storm. Why exile? Why 70 years? From the ground it looked like failure, but God saw it as a furnace, a necessary refining. Israel's heart had been divided by idols for generations. God allowed them to experience the emptiness of Babylon's gods. In exile they learned that God was not confined to a temple or a land. Their faith became portable, personal, and resilient. The exile stripped away false securities, forcing them to depend on God alone. It was painful, but it was surgery, not punishment. God was forging a new identity for His people. The 70 years were not absence, but intense divine work. Out of the fire, a stronger, purer people would emerge. God was preparing them for restoration. God's promise was not empty. After 70 years, the Persian king Cyrus set the exiles free. Some returned to Jerusalem, a city in ruins, to rebuild. The work was hard, the progress slow, but God's promise fueled their perseverance. The temple was rebuilt, worship restored, and the city's walls raised again. Leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah guided the people back to faithfulness. The promise unfolded across generations, requiring patience and faith. God proved Himself faithful. He brought His people home. The exile ended, and a new day began. Restoration was not instant, but it was real. God's word stood firm through every trial. The long night was over. The dawn of hope had come. The exile's story speaks to us all. We each have our Babylon moments. Seasons of waiting, loss, or confusion can feel endless. We pray for quick deliverance, but sometimes God's not yet feels like never. In these times, Jeremiah's message is our anchor. God's delay is not denial. He is working in the waiting. He shapes our character, deepens our trust, and prepares us for what's next. His plans are set long before our crisis begins. Our feelings may falter, but His purpose stands. Hope is not naive optimism, but confidence that our pain has meaning. Our story is not over. God brings beauty from ashes. He did it for Israel, and He does it for us through Christ. God specializes in turning endings into new beginnings. The waiting is never wasted. Jeremiah 29 is God's love letter to every exile, ancient or modern. No matter how lost we feel, we are never beyond His reach. His plans are always for our ultimate peace and restoration. God sees our pain, hears our cries, and invites us to trust His faithfulness. He calls us to live fully where we are, to seek the good of our city, and to invest in hope. The promise finds its fulfillment in Jesus, who brings us home from the exile of sin. Our true citizenship is in heaven, and God's shalom is ours through His Spirit. If you're waiting, know this: God has not forgotten you. His plans are good, His timing perfect, and His promise sure. The night may be long, but the dawn is coming. Hold fast to hope.